I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the brand new Mazda CX-30. Now, you and I took a close look at the CX-30 at the Geneva Motor Show a couple of months ago here in Europe. Now we're getting our first drive of the thing about 6 months ahead of it arriving in Australia, early 2020. We're in Frankfurt today, going to get an idea of what this pretty consequential new small SUV is like to drive. And you know, it's kind of small, it's kind of medium, it's going to slot between the CX-3 and the CX-5. Now, a lot of you asked below the video when we took a look in Geneva, why is this not just the new CX-3? The answer is because the CX-3 sells bloody well actually in Australia. So does the CX-5. So Mazda are hoping this is a bit like a Goldilocks car to sit between the two of them. It'll probably be offered in 3 or 4 trims in Australia with a 2 and a 2.5 litre petrol engine choice, a lot like the Mazda 3 small car, and later with the Skyactiv X. Essentially, this thing sits on the same underpinnings as the 3. The interior is pretty similar, and we're going to check that out next. But first, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe below the video and the notification bell so you never miss one of our full-length, highly detailed Australian video car reviews. Let's jump inside. The interior of the CX-30 is very reminiscent of the new 3, and that's a good thing in my opinion because the 3 has the best interior in the small car segment. It was always pretty good, but this new generation vehicle has leapfrogged everything else like the Volkswagen Golf, etc. The CX-30 is going to do that to small SUVs as well, simply because this just feels way more plush, way more elegant than vehicles like, you know, the Nissan Qashqai or the Volkswagen Tiguan short wheelbase, which will soon, be complemented by other Volkswagen SUVs in Australia. This one feels a lot more expensive. Now, that's an interesting point. We don't know what Mazda are going to price this thing like in Australia, but if I was going to take a guess, I'd say it'll be between the CX-3 and the CX-5, so probably a price of entry in the upper 20s going into the low 40s, which I think would be fair. So what do you get in this interior? Well, you get lots of soft materials. On the upper spec cars, there's a brown base for the interior. So brown up here on the upper dash with like light colored stitching. A contrast color here, that looks nice. On the low spec cars, which have a cloth interior, they actually have a blue base for the dash, which will be different. We haven't actually seen that in the flesh yet. I kind of dig it though, because I like to see people breaking out from boring black interiors. Now, the white leather seats of this high-spec variant of the CX-30 won't be to everyone's tastes, and they will be tough to keep clean, but I reckon they set off the Sol Red Crystal outside very nicely. Nice thin rim steering wheel. This one's a manual. How cool is that? Gotta love Europe. Sadly, Mazda Australia are not going to take the manual at this stage, but you never know. At least they offer it on every grade of the 3, right? Get these lovely analog gauges with a digital portion in the center. Honestly, they look beautiful. They'd be at home in a proper German sports car. The infotainment is driven by this large widescreen up here on the dash. It is not a touchscreen. Mazda are moving away from touch towards fully embracing the rotary style controller. That's fascinating because like Audi are running away from this and integrating 2 touchscreens in the dash, which I don't like. I actually prefer doing things through a hard control. It's easier on the move. Let me know down below whether you agree or not. Practicality looks okay. You've got 2 cup holders here. You've got a big compartment here under the center armrest. Decent sized door bins, but still a few weird things like why is there no wireless smartphone charging on a brand new car for 2020? I don't know. Let's take a look in the back and see what life is like for people in the second row. The CX-30 is an interesting car because even though it's, pretty small, compact dimensions, it's way less pokey than the CX-3. It is a better size, in my opinion, even though that really small SUV, it works for some people and that's why a lot of people buy it. I think more people, though, are going to buy this CX-30 because here in the back, you've got what I would call usable space. So I'm 6 foot, I've got fairly long legs. My legroom sitting behind my own driving position is pretty good. Toe room's fine. Headroom, I've got another inch or 2, so no complaints. This is not meant to be a family car. Mazda make, several larger SUVs, the CX-5, the CX-8, the CX-9, so there's no trouble getting you into something bigger. But I think this is right-sized for a lot of people. You could fit a third person in the center. The transmission tunnel isn't too high. As a 4-seater, makes a lot of sense. two parents, two kids in the back, or a dog or something. Maybe not a dog on the white leather, but you know what I mean. You got a fold down armrest here with two cup holders, that's good. Got air vents in the back, very useful in Australia where it's hot. However, Europe gets hot too. It's pretty warm today here in Germany, so I think air vents in the second row ought to just become standard everywhere. Now, the materials in the back, they take a step down. That's kind of weird because the new 3 has soft touch materials in the rear. It's a bit sad to see Mazda cutting costs there. There's also no USB ports in the back. Now, you get those in the CX-5, so maybe Mazda have just decided that's where they start in their range of SUVs, but I do think having a couple of ports here or in the armrest would have been a way to lift it a bit higher. Here around the back of the CX-30, before we take a look in the boot, I want to say that I think this thing is quite a looker, especially out here in the natural light, which is quite different to the lighting in a motor show hall. Just like the 3 hatch looks better in the real world than in photos, so too does the CX-30, I reckon. Now, the black cladding is a bit of a controversial point for some people. I don't mind it. It's an SUV. It's meant to have that kind of rugged thing going. But let me know down in the comments, do you like the way the CX-30 looks or not? Now, in terms of boot space, this thing's good. So we found it in the rear seat. Mazda are learning very, very quickly how to package their vehicles more like European cars and less like pokey little cars. So too it is here in the boot. There's 430 litres on offer, which is almost as big as a CX-5. It's only 12 litres off a CX-5. So here you can have a smaller, easier to park SUV without skimping on luggage capacity. Mazda are very good at developing this boot cover here that gets out of your way on their SUVs, so that's pretty cool. Otherwise, it's pretty basic. As you can see here, with the Chasing Cars suitcase, there's a bit of a load lip, so you do have to lift heavy things up and out of the boot, which is annoying. On the CX-5, there's no load lip. There's no shopping bag hooks or anything clever like that in the boot, sadly. But what there is the ability to lock the car and walk away if you go for a version with the electric tailgate. This car here is likely the highest spec that we would have in Australia, so there will be power operation for the boot lid. So the all-important question, what is the Mazda CX-30 like to drive? Well, good news, because this thing is great to drive. It's a lot like the Mazda 3, but raised up a little bit. You know, you're sitting higher, you've got a bit better visibility. There's perhaps a touch more lean through the corners, but not a lot. It's one of the more athletic, more fun to drive small SUVs out there. But in a testament to Mazda's increasing familiarity with doing these vehicles well, it's athletic and it's sporty and engaging to drive in the corners without sacrificing ride comfort, which is good. And you don't have to get the small wheels to generate that result. Here in Europe, they are going to sell the CX-30 on 16-inch wheels, which look ridiculous, but it's very likely that those won't come to Australia and that the smallest wheel size back home will be the 18-inch wheels that you can see on this car. And despite the fact they are 18 inches in diameter, the ride is plush, it's cushy. You go down the road without feeling jarred by bumps. Now, we're in Europe, they build roads a little bit better than back in Australia, but we've hit the occasional pothole in town and it responds very, very well. The body control is one of the standout aspects of the dynamic experience in the CX-30. Even when you're loaded right up in the corners, the body's sitting, fairly flat, and the Bridgestone Turanza tyres are not having to get vocal because the chassis is doing a lot of the work. Likewise, the steering is nice and engaging. It's not too fast or slow. It's not too heavy or light. It's mid-weighted. It feels pretty intuitive, I would say. It's probably not the last word in steering. My best guess would be that the Ford Escape that will come out next year will probably best a little in the steering department. But I think I like the steering better than the Tiguan, for example. The front end is pretty faithful as well, and you can feel the rear end working with the car. Like the 3, the CX-30 uses a torsion beam rear suspension, and that's because this is a front-wheel drive car, so all-wheel drive will also be offered in Australia, but they weren't available to drive here in Frankfurt. If you go for all-wheel drive, you'll get independent rear suspension, so I can't tell you if that's better or worse because I haven't driven it, but the torsion beam is fine. Now, Mazda shifted to the torsion beam not for a cost saving or anything like that, but because they actually thought it rode a little better, and that it was mechanically sort of simpler and just a better all-around product for the feel of the car. And going into some decent corners now, you don't feel like you're worse off with a torsion beam. It's a bit like a Peugeot 3008 in that department. These aren't cars that leave you wanting IRS specifically, so that's a good thing. Now, I usually start by talking about what's under the bonnet, and I haven't done so in this review because the engines that we've driven here in Europe today are pretty irrelevant to what will be coming to Australia in the CX-30. So what I'm driving now is a 1.8 litre diesel. You can get that engine in the CX-3, but Mazda Australia say they're probably not going to take it in the CX-30. That's a bit of a shame. I think it's always nice to have a diesel option in an SUV, and the 1.8 litre is a decent thing. Not fast, but very, very economical. It's averaging 5.5 litres per 100 Ks on a pretty testing route that involved a bit of Autobahn. The other engine that we've driven in the CX-30 is a 2 litre naturally aspirated petrol. Now that will be coming to Australia, but in a different state of tune. So the one that we've got here is only producing 90 kilowatts of power, and that's no turbocharging. In fact, we're not going to get a turbo CX-30, at least there's not one planned. And so that's pretty slow. But what Mazda Australia are doing is they're very likely to bring a more powerful version of that 2 litre, a 110 kilowatt version, plus a 140 kilowatt 2.5 litre. Now that will certainly make things feel a lot more sprightly in the CX-30, and it'll be more appropriate because what we have is a really nice chassis that is in need of a decent engine. And one that can kind of exploit the limits of the chassis a bit better. So the 2.5 litre will get there. For me, I'd love to see the CX-30 with the 2.5 litre turbo and all-wheel drive from the CX-5. I think that would be terrific. It's a great engine in the CX-5, but in this smaller, slightly lighter package, it'd be a lot of fun, I reckon. A Skyactiv X unit will be coming next year, I'd say, but that's not a performance motor. We've driven it today in the Mazda 3, and it's only feels as quick as the normal 2.5 litre Atmo unit. It's got 132 kilowatts of power, but that'll give us another flavour of CX-30 when it arrives in Australia. You should also expect all of the adaptive safety kit to be standard across the range, like it is on the 3. So high-speed AEB, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist. That should all be part of the standard fit package back home. So those are some first opinions of the Mazda CX-30 on the road. We have driven it today in continental Europe, different road surface to back home, so things will change a little bit between this drive and the domestic launch back in Australia, but I think things would have to go very wrong for the CX-30 to not be well received back home. It's the right size for the job, it has a fantastic interior, and riding on the 3's platform, the dynamics are good as well. A bigger engine will be important for the Australian market than the small 2 litre petrol here, but Mazda say that they are taking care of that. Now, if you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video and hit that notification bell so you never miss one of our full-length Australian video car reviews. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.